Well, this is a cover that makes a lot of promises that we all know won't be fulfilled. Sonic and Sally in full wedding regalia groaning as Tails bashes Robotnik in the face. Look at this image and try to tell me that it wouldn't set some very lofty expectations in the mind of a fan who was seeing it for the first time. I'm reminded of the Silver Age comics, back when a publisher would put literally anything on the cover of a comic in an attempt to sell issues, regardless of how little it had to do with the actual content. Well, this cover does have at least a little bit to do with the insides, but as we'll soon see, it's based around the sort of sensationalism selling that the Silver Age was well known for. We open to our first story, Wedding Bell Blues, oh god, what's wrong with Sonic's face? Why does Antoine look like he's being put through a taffy pulling machine? Why does Sally have such pointy hips? Also, hi Bunny, it's been a while since we've seen you. But yeah, with all the dialogue that's cropping up, the wedding dress, the construction, it really does seem like they're going through with the whole wedding thing this time, and I'm sure it's not just a cheap fake out for the audience. I mean, they wouldn't really be silly enough to try and pull this whole fake wedding thing twice within 3 issues of each other, now would they? Would they? Anyway, while Sonic's busy saving Antoine from himself, Sally and Bunny go off to do some work on her dress, where a wandering Motobug just happens to be listening in and catches wind of the big news. Thus, he speeds off to Robotropolis to let his glorious leader know what's going on. Cut to Robotnik enjoying a nice game of darts on his Sonic brand dartboard, available wherever fine tat is sold. Crabmeat shuffles in, bearing the message himself, but Robotnik is just as disbelieving of the news as the rest of the audience.
Unintelligible intelligence! Someone must have their wires crossed! Couldn't possibly be so.
Crabmeat is quick to point out that it's even in the daily papers, the Robotropolis Times, and yet again I bring up the most pertinent of questions: who is printing this stuff? In a world where Robotnik controls almost everything, who is still broadcasting over the radio, over TV, printing freaking newspapers that all apparently are still delivered to Robotnik? Robotnik, wanting some intelligent intelligence, sends out a spy bot to see just what the heck is going on, and we cut back to the preparations for the supposed wedding. Sonic and Sally are talking, asking if they're both ready for the big day. When Sally accuses Sonic of getting cold feet, he reaffirms that he'll be more than ready to say "I do" at the altar the following day. And then wham! Batman reference. The spy bot sent to gather intelligence just happens to be in front of a spotlight? No, an open window that just happens to line up with the sun, moon. It's not terribly clear. The bat clears out after being spotted, and we cut back to Robotnik mustering his forces.
Gentlemen, we have a wedding to crash. Many of you will not return from the coming conflict. Frankly, I could care less. Onward, troops, to victory!
A speech that would make Patton weep.
You magnificent bastard, I read your book!
Cut back to Sonic and Sally standing at the altar. Everyone's getting all weepy-eyed, except for Antoine, of course. And, of course, the non-denominational penguin holding a book is at the part where he goes, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." And then someone speaks,
"Stop the wedding!"
And we see a massive group of SWAT bots breaking into the church and immediately firing on the altar. Sally looks rather deadpan about the whole thing, though that might just be more due to Sonic's joke. "I didn't invite these guys. They must be from your side of the family." Okay, not gonna lie, that one got me to chuckle a little bit. Things go from bad to worse as the bots quickly flood the entire chapel with laser fire to the point where Sonic has to hit the deck along with Sally. And then in charges a second wave of badniks, this wave made up of actual enemies from the games, including that enemy, Slicer. Oh, the stories of terror that an old-school Sonic fan could tell you about that guy. It then cuts to the outside, showing that Robotnik's not only got a massive force invading the church, but also has a large force on the outside to keep anyone from escaping. So here we have the first large-scale assault that Robotnik has ever really put on in the comic, aside from his off-screen takeover of the entire planet, and it seems to be going pretty well. At least until Sonic starts busting heads on the large splash page. I'll be honest with you, most of the rest of the story is just Sonic, and only Sonic, fighting off Robotnik's hordes. He does make a cursory attempt at getting Sally out of there, and takes her back in after seeing the outside force, but even outnumbered and outgunned, Sonic single-handedly destroys all of Robotnik's invading forces. Where were all the other freedom fighters during this? We don't even see Bunny, Rotor, or Tails when the invasion starts. Antoine just plays the part of a coward, and Sally basically just gets carried around like Princess Rudo. Robotnik finally enters, confident that his minions have made quick work of the freedom fighters, instead finding his army decimated and his enemies untouched. Sally cuts a rope that drops some heavy stage curtains on top of Robotnik, knocking him down, and again the freedom fighters have Robotnik at their mercy and decide to do absolutely nothing about it. Turns out Sonic's atop a stage, and now everyone else is cheering for him. Where were they all when this battle was taking place? No idea, never explained, don't care, moving on. And then it's finally revealed that this whole wedding spiel was actually a play entitled Our Wedding. It's always so frustrating when fictional characters don't take the time to actually read the news stories all the way. We cut to the next day when Sonic and the Freedom Fighters are helping to clean up the mess left by the battle the day before. Everyone's working pretty hard, with Rotor apparently suffering from some form of narcolepsy there in the corner, and then Sally gets flirty for some reason, saying that the barn where they had the play would be the perfect place for their real wedding. Sonic responds by immediately dashing off, saying that while he doesn't have a problem with marriage, he'd rather have her chasing after him rather than just going with it. What a hero. This story bothers me in multiple ways. All of these older issues have large leaps in logic, that's just something I've come to accept, but there's a limit. Robotnik not seeing that the wedding was a play, for one, is such a forced convenience that it's just aggravating. Add to it, why would it matter whether or not it was a play? They're your mortal enemies. You're supposed to be hunting them down, regardless of whether they're getting married, going to the mall, or on a cross-country trip to Timbuktu. But the thing that bothers me the most about this story is that, like many before it, it wastes all the other characters present in favor of having Sonic just be the one and only hero. I get it. It's Sonic's comic. He's the main character and the main hero. I won't deny that. But here you have a massive enemy force going after him and all of his friends. Friends who are just as much soldiers in this war against massive odds as he is. And they do absolutely nothing? Rotor doesn't have some sort of crazy machine he can use? Tails has proven he's capable of handling smaller badniks, so why not let him help out? Antoine... well, okay, he's still pretty much a joke at this point in time, but Bunny and Sally just had a story 2 issues ago about how they weren't pushovers, and neither of them so much as throws a punch this entire issue. I'm sorry if I keep going over this, and yes, the comic does get better about this as it utilizes more characters, but that time is still a ways off. And it's incredibly frustrating to see a single character put on a pedestal to the detriment of all others. I wonder if this is how fans of secondary Batman characters feel. Anyway, enough of my ranting. We have a backup story to get into. The second part of Princess Sally's story, entitled In the Still of the Night, now given the subtitle, Sally's Crusade. Everyone's in Rotor's lab, working on their Geordie LaForge cosplay, as Rotor explains that while he ran pretty much every test he could think of on that weird orb that fell from the sky, they have discovered absolutely nothing about it. While Sonic and Rotor continue to discuss things about the orb, Sally's friend and caregiver, Rosie, walks in, saying that she has to talk to Sally alone about something important. Whatever they're talking about seems to have rattled Sally, and she takes off. Sonic starts to go after her to make sure she's okay, but Rosie stops him, stating that there are some roads that a person has to walk alone. And this is it, everyone. This is the moment where the shift began to totally take effect. We've seen bits and pieces of it here and there over the past few issues, a growing sense of continuity, slightly more drama, more world building, but it's here, in this backup story centering around Sally, that you see the real, true start of the shift. The reason Sally was called away was because her teacher, Julela, is apparently at death's door. Now, ordinarily, in a situation like this, I'd call out the story for not establishing this character beforehand before expecting us to sympathize with this situation, but it's a very human situation. Someone very close to Sally is dying, and she knows that this might be the last time she'll be able to talk to her. And, as it turns out, Sally has a very good reason to be close to Julayla. She was more than just a teacher to Sally. She basically became a surrogate mother for Sally, teaching her everything she needed to know about being there during the most important, and as we see in this panel, most traumatic moments of her young life. The whole grab the stone from my hand shtick might be cliched, but it does give us a sense that Sally has grown as a person, at least from the perspective of Julayla, who's been training her whole life. And then there's no overly dramatic last moment. We don't see the hand fall to the side. She doesn't even take one last shuddering breath. Instead, after Julayla's said her piece, and Sally's had a chance to say goodbye, we cut to a mourning Sally, sitting alone, looking up at the stars. She's obviously in grieving, and trying her best to hold back her tears. And then Sonic comes out of nowhere, offering a shoulder for her to cry on, as she confides in him how lonely she feels tonight. Tonight is almost yesterday, Sal. And there are many more tomorrows ahead. This story is an excellent example of the early promise of the comic that really started to show. Here we have a children's comic from the 90s that dared to address the death of a loved one. True, it wasn't like they gave it a long, in-depth story arc, but if this story proves anything, it's that you don't have to have stories drawn out to make something unique and meaningful. The characters' words and expressions speak volumes, and even though we have never met Julayla before, the way it's presented here makes her relation to Sally totally believable, and it ends on what I consider to be one of the most touching notes in the entire comic's history, comparable only to the reveal of Nicole's new form in Stargazing and Bunny's silent breakdown during the New World saga. It's just a shame it was paired with such a terrible main story. At the same time, I'd argue that this issue is worth a read just for that backup story. It doesn't progress the cliffhanger from the last issue that much, but it at least acknowledges that particular storyline is still existing, while taking the time to actually add a bit more of a relatable element to Sally, a character who, let's be honest, up to this point in the comic, hasn't really made the best impression for herself. Leaving this behind, I'm sure we'll get a resolution to the story in issue 19, and oh, wait, we're not gonna see it there, because it's not resolved in that issue. It's actually resolved in the very first special for the series, Sonic in Your Face! And that's what we're going to be looking at next time. I'm excited. Are you excited? 'Cause I'm excited. I need to learn how to edit these scripts one day. Bye!